You need to move. My daughter needs that window seat. She gets... The entitled voice sliced through the tense, already delayed cabin like a knife through warm butter. Clara Johnson, a seasoned corporate consultant with years of hard-earned composure, slowly looked up from her laptop. Seat 14C, the one she'd booked weeks in advance for the extra legroom, suddenly felt much smaller. Standing over her was a blonde woman, mid-40s, with expensive sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown of entitlement. Resting a manicured hand possessively on her daughter's shoulder, the woman's icy blue eyes glared down. The girl, maybe 8 years old, stared at the floor, nervously tugging at her pink backpack. "I'm sorry, this is my assigned seat," Clara responded calmly, despite the tightening knot in her stomach. "I booked it specifically for the legroom." The woman's gaze traveled slowly over Clara's tailored navy suit, her neatly styled braids, and the glowing laptop screen filled with graphs and figures. There it was, that look. Clara had seen it in boardrooms and client meetings, a swift judgment, an unspoken dismissal. Leaning in, the woman hissed just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "My daughter has anxiety. She needs the window. Surely you understand." Clara understood plenty. She understood what it meant to be a black woman fighting for a seat, literally and figuratively, in spaces designed to exclude her. But she wasn't moving. "Ma'am, my seat is 14C. Your daughter's seat is wherever you were assigned. I'm not moving," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. The woman's cheeks flushed crimson. "Fine, I'll get a flight attendant." Clara didn't flinch. "Be my guest." The irony wasn't lost on her. On her laptop sat a half-finished presentation, a diversity and inclusion strategy she'd pitch tomorrow to Pine Haven Financial, a company, funny enough, that prided itself on progressive values. As the woman stormed off, Clara caught the apologetic glance of an older man across the aisle. He nodded, the silent recognition of injustice, but like so many, said nothing. Minutes later, the woman returned, smug with a flight attendant in tow. Clara braced herself. "I'm Madeline Brooks," the woman announced proudly. "My daughter needs the window seat. We're in row 14, A and B." The young flight attendant, Michaela, checked her tablet. "Actually, Ms. Brooks, your assigned seats are row 22, A and B." Madeline scoffed. "Those seats don't recline. Surely you can rearrange things for a child." Michaela's gaze shifted to Clara. "Ms. Johnson, 14C?" Clara nodded, producing her boarding pass. "Ms. Johnson is correctly seated," Michaela said firmly. "Mrs. Brooks, I'll have to ask you to return to your assigned seats." Madeline's face darkened. "My daughter has special needs." "That should have been arranged during booking," Michaela replied coolly. "Ms. Johnson is not obligated to move." A hush swept the cabin. With a final glare, Madeline growled, "We'll remember this when choosing airlines," before dragging her daughter away. Michaela turned back, her voice softening. "Sorry for the trouble, Ms. Johnson. Can I get you anything?" Clara exhaled, the tension finally breaking. "No, thank you." For once, someone in authority took her side. That shouldn't have been shocking, but it was. As Clara returned to her presentation, a voice beside her said, "Handled that like a pro." A man, early 30s, slid into the middle seat. "Daniel Cooper," he smiled, "HR at Whitmore Consulting Group. Mind if I ask what you're working on?" As the engines roared to life and the aircraft began its slow taxi toward the runway, Clara Johnson allowed herself a glance back. Several rows behind, Madeline Brooks sat stiff as a board, her expression carved in stone. Their eyes met, just for a moment. Clara wondered what story Madeline was telling herself now. What mental gymnastics did this woman perform to convince herself she was the victim? What version of the truth did she cling to? The plane tilted upward, forcing Clara back into her seat. She let the moment go, literally and figuratively, turning her gaze toward the sky. Whatever stories Madeline needed to survive, they were no longer her problem. What Clara didn't know was that this brief, frustrating encounter wasn't the end. It was the spark that would set an entirely new chapter of her life ablaze. By the time the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, Clara and Daniel Cooper had found easy conversation. What started as polite small talk had deepened as they discovered a surprising number of shared experiences. Both grew up in Philadelphia, though on opposite sides of the city. Both were products of HBCUs, Clara from Howard University, Daniel from Morehouse College. And both carried the familiar scars of being the only one in spaces not designed for people like them. "So what brings you to Westfield?" Daniel asked as the flight attendants rolled out the beverage cart. Clara smiled. "Client pitch tomorrow, then my mother's birthday dinner. She moved here after retirement last year, needed a change of scenery." Daniel chuckled. "That's great. I'm actually here for a conference. Organizational psychology. I'm presenting on microaggressions and performance reviews." Clara's eyebrows lifted. "Now that is a session I could fill with stories." "Oh, trust me," Daniel laughed, drawing a few curious glances from nearby passengers. "Same here. What's the worst one you have experienced?" Clara accepted a cup of coffee from Michaela, the flight attendant, with a grateful nod. "Honestly, my first boss once told me, during my review, that I was surprisingly articulate, then looked baffled when I didn't take it as a compliment." Daniel winced. "Ouch! Classic. I had a senior VP tell me, right in the middle of a leadership meeting, 'You're not like other black men.'" He shook his head. I made her explain. Watched her dig a hole for 2 whole minutes before she bailed out. They shared a laugh, the kind that came not from humor, but from the mutual recognition of just how common such stories were. Their light-hearted moment was interrupted as Michaela returned, kneeling slightly to speak quietly. "Ms. Johnson, I wanted to let you know the woman from earlier has made a formal complaint to the senior flight attendant." Clara blinked. "About me? On what grounds?" Michaela sighed. "She's claiming you were hostile and used inappropriate language. I've already informed my colleague that I witnessed the entire exchange and that it's not true." The tightness in Clara's chest returned. No matter how calm, how professional, this was always the risk. "Thank you for speaking up. I know that's not easy." Michaela smiled faintly. "It happens more than you think. Some passengers try to manipulate the system. Accusations. Sometimes that's all it takes." As Michaela moved on, Daniel met Clara's eyes. "You okay?" Clara exhaled slowly. "Yeah, just tired of it. Tired of always needing to be perfect. One wrong move, one flash of frustration, and suddenly I'm the angry black woman. Exactly what they expect." Daniel nodded solemnly. "That emotional tax, it's exhausting." They fell quiet, the hum of the engines filling the space between them. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Tell me about your pitch tomorrow. Might help take your mind off this nonsense." Clara welcomed the change of subject. She dove into her framework, a holistic approach to diversity that went far beyond just hiring. "The problem," she explained, "is that companies love to show off diverse headcounts, but they don't do the real work. They hire people of color but don't create paths for advancement. No support, no retention strategy." Daniel nodded, his interest clear. "Exactly. It becomes a PR stunt. Diversity for the annual report. Nothing more." Their conversation flowed easily. Two professionals exchanging war stories, ideas, and the quiet understanding that only those who've walked the same path can share. For the first time all night, Clara felt her passion reignite, the earlier encounter fading like a bad dream. Time slipped by faster than she expected. Before long, the captain's voice crackled through the intercom, announcing their descent into Westfield. Daniel pulled a business card from his wallet. "I'd love to stay in touch. Maybe grab coffee while we're both in town?" Clara accepted the card, noticing the embossed Whitmore Consulting Group logo. "I'd like that. My pitch is at 10 tomorrow, but I should be free by noon." "Perfect," Daniel smiled. "Text me when you're done. We'll figure it out." As they exchanged numbers, Clara couldn't help but reflect on the strange symmetry of it all. Out of a ridiculous confrontation had come this, a potential new connection, maybe even something more. The city lights twinkled below them like a massive circuit board as the plane descended. Westfield spread out, vast, glowing, full of unknown possibilities. "Good luck tomorrow," Daniel said, as Clara carefully tucked away her laptop and presentation materials. "From what you've told me, you'll crush it." "Thanks. Good luck at your conference, too." The plane touched down with a gentle bump. As they taxied to the gate, Clara felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. For years, Westfield had been just another business stop. But with her mother now living here in this unexpected new connection, the city felt different, like maybe something significant was waiting for her, or something disastrous. Maybe both. That was the funny thing about moments like this. They carried within them the seeds of both triumph and disaster. Mounted on the wall behind the receptionist's desk was a gleaming plaque that read, "Whitmore Financial Group," a name that carried weight in Westfield's financial sector. Clara Johnson smoothed her blazer, forcing a steady breath as she approached. "Clara Johnson, here for the tenant with Mr. Whitmore," she told the receptionist, a young white man dressed sharply in a slim-fit suit and rectangular designer glasses. "Yes, Miss Johnson. They're expecting you in the lighthouse room," he replied, flashing a professional smile. "Can I get you anything before I show you in? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, thank you." Clara followed him down a long corridor lined with black and white photographs of lighthouses from around the world. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, the sound sharp and deliberate. She was shifting into performance mode, shoulders back, chin up, every step confident. Years of navigating rooms full of powerful white men had taught her the necessity of commanding respect before a word was spoken. The lighthouse room was a corner conference space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of Lake Michigan. Around a massive oval table sat 5 people, 3 men and 2 women, all white, all turning their attention toward Clara as she entered. "Johnson, welcome to Whitmore Financial," the older man at the head of the table said, rising to greet her. "I'm James Wilson. We've been looking forward to your presentation." Clara shook his hand firmly, then greeted each executive as introductions made their way around. Natalie Parker, Chief Operating Officer; Edward Thompson, VP of Human Resources; Michael Jefferson, General Counsel; and finally, Madeline Brooks, Head of Talent Acquisition, the last woman said, her voice cool, professional. Clara's breath caught for the briefest moment. There she was, the same woman from the plane. Karen in the sky, now Madeline in the boardroom. Dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, her expression unreadable. Recognition flickered in Madeline's eyes, followed by a flash of something harder. Calculation. "Ms. Johnson," Madeline added with a tight smile and a perfunctory handshake. "We meet again." James Wilson glanced between them. "Oh, you two know each other?" Before Clara could answer, Madeline cut in smoothly. "We were on the same flight yesterday. Small world." "Indeed," Clara replied, keeping her tone even despite her racing pulse. "Of all the companies in Westfield, it had to be here." "Well, that's excellent," James said, oblivious to the tension rippling beneath the surface. "Always good to have a connection already established. Shall we get started?" Clara set up her presentation, hyper-aware of Madeline's eyes on her, watching, waiting. As head of talent acquisition, Madeline was a key stakeholder capable of derailing the entire pitch if she chose. Clara couldn't afford to falter. Taking a steadying breath, she began. "Thank you all for this opportunity. Whitmore Financial has built a strong reputation for leadership and innovation. Today, I'll show how a comprehensive diversity and inclusion strategy can position you as industry leaders, not just in finance, but in organizational culture." As Clara advanced through her slides, she outlined the market advantages, innovation metrics, and the human impact of a fully integrated DEI framework. Surprisingly, James Wilson seemed engaged, nodding thoughtfully. Natalie Parker asked sharp, insightful questions about implementation and timelines. Edward Thompson leaned forward, particularly intrigued by retention strategies. Only Madeline remained stone-faced. She scribbled occasional notes but offered no comments, no questions. The silence was pointed, heavy with unspoken skepticism. Finally, when Clara reached the slide on metrics and accountability, Madeline's voice sliced through the room. "This all sounds ambitious?" Her tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't complimentary either. "I'm concerned about the resources required. We already have diversity initiatives. What makes your approach worth the added investment?" It was a fair question, on the surface. Yet Clara couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't just professional scrutiny, it was personal. "That's an excellent question," Clara replied, steady. "The difference is integration and accountability. Most companies run diversity programs in silos. Recruitment here, mentorship there. My framework creates a cohesive system where every element supports the other, with clear metrics to track progress and hold leadership responsible." She advanced the slide, revealing comparative data from major institutions. Firms who implemented this model saw a 27% increase in retaining underrepresented talent and a 35% boost in innovation within 18 months. Madeline opened her mouth, but before she could counter, James Wilson cut in. "Those are compelling numbers, Ms. Johnson, especially the innovation data. That aligns perfectly with our 5-year plan." The mood shifted. The focus turned to implementation. Natalie Parker drilled into change management logistics. Edward Thompson asked about staff training. Madeline stayed quiet, her hands folded tightly in her lap, but Clara could still feel the chill from her corner of the table. As the meeting wrapped, James stood. "Thank you, Ms. Johnson. This was thorough and well argued. We'll discuss internally and reach out by next week." "I appreciate the opportunity," Clara replied, packing her laptop carefully. "I look forward to your decision." The executives began to file out, all except one. Madeline Brooks lingered, arms crossed as she approached. "Quite a coincidence," she said in a low voice. "First the plane, now my boardroom." Clara met her gaze, calm. "Not really. Westfield's a major business hub, and Whitmore's an important client." Madeline gave a thin smile. "Still, interesting how things work out." She adjusted her designer watch, flashing a logo Clara recognized from a recent $5,000 price tag ad. "You gave a strong presentation. Very polished." Clara ignored the barb in the word. "Thank you. I believe in Whitmore's potential to lead in this space." Madeline's expression hardened. "Just so you know, these decisions aren't made by one person. It's a team evaluation." The message was clear. Madeline couldn't kill this deal alone, but she would certainly try. "Of course," Clara replied smoothly. "That's why my strategy addressed each department's unique needs. Everyone at that table has a stake." They stared each other down, two professionals, both understanding exactly what was unspoken. This wasn't over. Clara gave a polite nod and turned away, her heart hammering. She had won today's round, but she wasn't naive. In corporate America, battles like this were rarely decided in a single meeting. The subtle power struggle that began thousands of feet in the air had now spilled into the polished halls of Whitmore Financial. Madeline Brooks stood tall, her professional mask back in place. "Well," Madeline finally said, breaking the silence, "safe travels back to wherever you're based." "Philadelphia," Clara Johnson replied evenly, refusing to flinch. "But I'll be in Westfield until Sunday. My mother lives here now." Something flickered across Madeline's face. Surprise, maybe, or thinly veiled impatience. Clara couldn't tell. Still, she had offered that piece of personal information deliberately. It was a small assertion of control, a reminder she wasn't some random outsider. "Enjoy your stay then," Madeline said crisply, already turning toward the door. Someone will see you out. Clara remained still, watching Madeline's retreating figure disappear down the corridor. Only then did she allow herself a quiet exhale. Of all the complications she had mentally prepared for walking into this pitch, running into Madeline, Karen from the plane, had not been one of them. Yet here they were. Navigating the usual challenges of being a black woman, pitching a transformative diversity proposal to a mostly white executive board was already a tightrope walk. Add in personal history, colored by a public clash over privilege and entitlement, and it became something else entirely. Gathering her materials, Clara's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Reynolds lit up the screen. "How'd the pitch go? Still on for coffee?" Despite everything, Clara smiled. "Still on," she typed. "Twist, you won't believe who works here. The woman from the plane. She's their head of talent acquisition." Marcus's reply came instantly. "You're kidding. That's... wow. Definitely need to hear this story. 12:30 at Lakefront Cafe?" "Perfect," Clara texted back. She checked the time. She had just enough to decompress before meeting him. As the elevator descended, Clara reflected on the absurdity of it all. A random airplane encounter bleeding into her professional world. Coincidence? Fate? Or just the universe's twisted sense of humor? Either way, it wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Lakefront Cafe occupied the ground floor of a repurposed warehouse. All exposed brick and oversized windows framing views of Lake Michigan. Plants filled every corner, softening the industrial edge. Marcus was already there, casually dressed, nursing a latte. He waved as Clara approached. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Took longer than expected to find a cab." "No problem," Marcus grinned. "I've been people watching. This place is crawling with hipsters. Skinny jeans, asymmetrical haircuts, the works." Clara laughed, some of the morning's tension lifting. "It's a bit much, isn't it? But the coffee's supposed to be the best in town." "Confirmed," Marcus raised his mug, "worth every overpriced penny." After ordering her Americano, Clara filled him in. Every jaw-dropping detail of seeing Karen, no, Madeline, sitting in the boardroom. Marcus's eyes widened. "You're kidding," he said, shaking his head. "Same woman? Same woman from the plane is their head of talent acquisition?" "Yep, if this was a movie, no one would believe it," Clara replied, rolling her eyes. "And of course, she's a key decision-maker on my proposal." "How did she react?" Marcus leaned in. "Professional. Barely. There was recognition, no doubt. She waited until everyone left to remind me that these decisions are made by the whole team, as in, she has influence." Clara took a sip of her coffee, the bitterness grounding her. Marcus frowned. "Think she's going to tank your proposal?" Clara sighed. "I hope not. It'd be wildly unprofessional. But ego's a funny thing." Marcus nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. People can be wildly unprofessional when their pride's bruised. Exactly. Clara drummed her fingers on the table. It's just infuriating. This proposal could genuinely help their company. But now there's a chance it gets torpedoed because I wouldn't give up my seat on a flight. "You know," Marcus said slowly, "this could backfire on her." Clara raised a brow. "How do you figure?" "Think about it. If Karen, pushes back for reasons that sound petty or personal, the other executives might notice. They seemed interested, right?" Clara nodded, especially James Wilson. He loved the innovation metrics. And Natalie Parker, the COO, asked all the right questions. "Exactly," Marcus grinned. "If Madeline's the only voice of resistance, it might expose her bias." Clara considered it, nodding slowly. "I didn't think of it that way. Still, I hate that this is even a factor. Personal baggage influencing business decisions that could impact hundreds of employees." "Welcome to corporate America," Marcus said, raising his mug in a mock toast, "where merit matters, but politics matters more." Clara chuckled, clinking her mug against his. Ain't that the truth? Their conversation drifted to Marcus's own work. He was presenting at his conference tomorrow, a paper on bias in performance evaluations. The biggest pushback I get, he explained, is from execs who swear their reviews are objective. We treat everyone the same, they say, without realizing that pretending not to see color is part of the problem. Clara nodded. The whole I don't see race fallacy, as if ignoring difference somehow makes everything fair. Exactly, you can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge. For the first time that day, Clara felt herself relax. It wasn't just the caffeine, it was Marcus. His easy confidence, his empathy, the way he saw through the corporate bullshit. So, Marcus asked as their coffees dwindled, what's next on your Westfield agenda, besides obsessing over Whitmore's decision? Clara laughed. My mom's birthday dinner tonight. She's turning 65, so the whole family's getting together. After that, not sure. I fly back Sunday. Marcus hesitated, then smiled. Any plans tomorrow? Not really. Might walk around Michigan Avenue. My mom's been on me to stop working so much and live a little. She sounds wise, Marcus grinned. Would you want some company? I finished my conference by noon. The question hung there, somewhere between casual and hopeful. Clara blinked, surprised by the warmth that flooded her chest. I'd like that, she said. It's been a while since I had good company on one of these trips. Marcus smiled. It's a date, then. Noon tomorrow. For the first time since the pitch, Clara let herself lean back and truly relax. Maybe the universe wasn't trying to punish her. Maybe, just maybe, it was opening a door she hadn't known was there. Their interaction had shifted. No longer just two professionals networking, but two people drawn together by shared experience. Clara Johnson considered Marcus's offer carefully, weighing potential complications against the pull she felt toward him. That sounds nice, she finally said, her voice softer now. But fair warning, I haven't done the tourist thing in ages. I might be terrible at it. Perfect, Marcus Reynolds grinned. We can be terrible at it together. I vote we start with the Art Institute. Pretentious enough to satisfy our professional egos, but fun enough to count as a real experience. Clara chuckled, surprised at how easy he made things feel. The Art Institute it is. As they exchanged tentative plans for tomorrow, Clara's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, her stomach tightening when she saw James Wilson, CEO of Whitmore Financial, calling directly. I should take this, she murmured. Marcus gave a supportive nod. Miss Johnson, James's voice came through crisp and formal. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Mr. Wilson. What can I do for you? I wanted to follow up on this morning's presentation. The team and I discussed your proposal immediately after you left. We were impressed, very impressed. Clara's pulse quickened. I'm glad to hear that. In fact, James continued, we'd like to move forward sooner than planned. Our board is under pressure to take real action on diversity, and your framework addresses exactly what's missing. That's excellent news, Clara said, catching Marcus's curious glance. She gave him a small thumbs up. There's one more thing, James added. We're hosting a charity gala tomorrow night at the Westfield Grand Hall, a fundraiser for educational programs in underserved communities. I'd like you to attend. It'll give you a chance to meet a few board members informally before we finalize the contract next week. I'd be honored, Clara replied, mentally rearranging her schedule. Wonderful, it's black tie, starts at 7. My assistant will send the details. Feel free to bring a guest if you'd like. After a few more pleasantries, Clara ended the call and looked at Marcus, who was already grinning. Good news, he asked. Very good news. They're moving forward with my proposal and invited me to their charity gala tomorrow night. Marcus's grin widened. That's fantastic. So Karen didn't manage to tank your pitch after all. Score one for meritocracy, Clara laughed. And the gala sounds fancy. Black tie, Marcus teased. Yeah, at Westfield Grand Hall, Clara nodded. And he said I could bring a guest. She hesitated before adding, would you want to come? I know it's short notice. It'd mean skipping the Art Institute. Are you kidding? Marcus grinned. I'd be honored. The Art Institute's not going anywhere. But a gala? Count me in. Besides, I clean up well in a tux, if I do say so myself. Clara smiled, feeling that strange lightness in her chest again. I don't doubt it. They finalized plans for the gala, and Clara couldn't help but marvel at how quickly this trip had shifted. From a racially charged encounter on a plane to a career-changing opportunity, and now, possibly, something more. Of course, one dark cloud lingered. Madeline Brooks. Clara had no doubt the woman would be at that gala, perfectly coiffed, ready to reassert control. But that was a worry for tomorrow. Tonight, Clara had something far better. Her mother's birthday. Vivian Johnson had always possessed the kind of quiet grace that filled a room without raising her voice. Now retired, she was a trailblazer in her own right, one of the first Black female physicians at her hospital. At 70, she had traded Philadelphia's familiar streets for Westfield's vibrant scene, embracing change with the same resolve that had carried her through every obstacle. My baby girl, Vivian beamed as she opened the door to her Maple Heights apartment, pulling Clara into a warm embrace. Right on time, as always. Happy birthday, Mom, Clara whispered, breathing in the familiar scent of Chanel No. 5, a fragrance that felt like home. The apartment was a perfect reflection of Vivian, elegant, dignified, and full of life. Antique pieces from Philadelphia sat alongside modern art, all against sweeping views of Lake Michigan. It was home. Come in, Vivian urged. Now, how'd the meeting go? Did they realize how lucky they'd be to have you? Settling on the couch with glasses of wine, Clara recounted the events of the day, including the shocking reveal of Madeline Brooks being head of talent acquisition at Whitmore Financial. Vivian shook her head, clicking her tongue. Lord, the universe does have a sense of humor. Not one I'm enjoying at the moment, Clara admitted. But it worked out. James Wilson called this afternoon. They're moving forward with my proposal. Of course they are, Vivian smiled confidently. They'd be fools not to. Clara grinned. Her mother had always believed in her, even when she doubted herself. And Marcus? Vivian asked, her brow arching. You mentioned him earlier. You're bringing him to this gala? Clara hesitated, a rare shyness creeping in. Yes, I just met him yesterday on the flight, but there's something about him, Mom. He's sharp, thoughtful, easy to talk to. Vivian studied her daughter closely, then smiled slowly. It's been a long time since I've seen that look on your face. Not since James. The name hung in the air. James, the one who almost was. They'd been inside, planning a life until a dream job in Singapore tore them apart. It was amicable, but left scars. This is nothing like that, Clara said quickly. It's just refreshing to connect with someone who understands the world I move through every day. Vivian nodded knowingly but didn't press. Well, I look forward to meeting him. Now, what do you say we get to dinner? I've been dying to try that new fusion spot. Clara laughed, rising to grab her coat. Lead the way, birthday girl. As they headed out, Clara's phone buzzed with a new message from Marcus, already Googling how to tie a bow tie, looking forward to tomorrow. Clara smiled down at the screen. For the first time in a long while, the future felt wide open, unpredictable, yes, but full of possibility. Clara Johnson sat across from Natalie Parker in the quiet corner of the upscale Maple and Vine Cafe, sunlight filtering through the large windows. The atmosphere was calm, but the conversation promised anything but. Elizabeth, Davenport's COO, had been direct from the start, something Clara appreciated. Thank you for meeting me, Clara. I wanted this conversation, off the record, so to speak, away from certain ears. Clara nodded. I figured. My mother warned me never to underestimate office politics. Elizabeth's lips curved in a half smile. Smart woman. She took a sip of her espresso, eyes sharp and thoughtful. Look, I'll be honest. There's a faction inside Whitmore Financial that's happy with how things are. Surface-level diversity initiatives, recruiting at HBCUs, sponsoring conferences. Looks great on paper. Changes nothing structurally. Clara's gaze stayed steady. And let me guess, Madeline Brooks is in that faction. Elizabeth chuckled softly, confirming Clara's suspicion. Very perceptive. Yes, Madeline's built her career measuring success by incremental gains. She knows how to produce reports that show progress without rocking the boat. Your proposal threatens that. Clara leaned back, carefully considering her words. And add in the little plane incident, I'm guessing. Elizabeth's silver bob caught the morning light as she nodded. We all picked up on the tension in the boardroom. Hard not to when someone's shooting daggers across the table. Look, Clara, I don't know what happened between you two on that flight, but I'm guessing it wasn't pleasant. Just know it didn't go unnoticed. I'm sure it didn't, Clara sighed. So, if there's all this resistance, why move forward at all? Because James Wilson and frankly, our board knows it's time. Elizabeth's voice lowered. The truth? Richard's daughter, she left finance last year. Brilliant kid. Got into one of the best firms straight out of school. Left because of the good old boys culture. Her words. It shook Richard. Made him see the cracks. Clara nodded slowly, processing the added layer of personal stakes. Elizabeth leaned forward, elbows on the table. Where do I stand? I'm with you. I've been in this industry 23 years. Watched too many talented women, too many people of color, walk away because they couldn't find a way forward. It's bad business, and frankly, I am tired of watching it happen. Their pastries arrived, an almond croissant for Elizabeth, a blueberry scone for Clara. They took a moment sipping coffee, each lost in thought. So, Clara asked finally, what should I expect? If Richard pushes this forward, but Madeline's determined to fight me at every turn. Elizabeth tore off a piece of croissant. That's why I asked to meet. Winning the contract? That's step one. The real challenge starts after. Karen, Madeline, won't oppose outright, but she knows how to slow things down. Withholding data you need, accidentally double booking meetings, quietly poisoning department heads against you. Clara gave a dry laugh. Classic corporate sabotage. Exactly, Elizabeth agreed. And it works because it's subtle. If you push back too hard, you're the angry outsider. If you stay quiet, you get steamrolled. Clara leaned in. So what's the play? Elizabeth's gaze sharpened. Build alliances early. Richard's on your side for now, but that's not enough. You need to win over Natalie Parker, the CFO Edward Thompson, and especially James Harrington in HR. If Karen tries to undermine you, you need enough internal support that it backfires. Clara nodded slowly. I can do that. Elizabeth smiled. I think you can. That's why I reached out. The conversation shifted then, becoming less formal. They swapped war stories about navigating boardrooms, shared frustrations over performative diversity programs, and found common ground in their wariness over corporate doublespeak. You know, Elizabeth mused as she sipped her espresso, the irony is that Karen genuinely believes she's done good work. And in a way, she has. Davenport looks better on paper than half the firms out there. But paper's cheap, Clara replied. It's the culture that costs. Elizabeth laughed, a sharp, genuine sound. Exactly. As they wrapped up, Elizabeth grew serious again. Tonight at the gala, watch your back. Karen plays nice in public, but she's got friends on that board. She'll try to corner you or embarrass you if she sees an opening. Clara nodded, already mentally preparing. Thanks for the heads up. I'll be ready. Elizabeth stood, smoothing her blazer. I'll be in your corner, Clara. But just remember, in this world, merit gets you in the door. Politics decides if you stay. Clara smiled grimly. I'm learning that fast. They parted with a firm handshake, mutual respect quietly cemented. Later that afternoon, back at her hotel, Clara stared at her reflection in the mirror as she got ready for the gala. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus Reynolds. Heading down, meet you in the lobby? Clara smiled, replying quickly, be right there. She checked herself once more, black evening gown, simple, elegant, the kind that spoke of quiet power. She grabbed her clutch, squared her shoulders, and headed for the elevator. The hotel lobby was bustling, but Marcus stood out easily. Dark suit, tailored perfectly, bow tie already in place. When he saw her, his eyes widened with quiet appreciation. Wow, he breathed. You look incredible. Clara flushed, unused to compliments that weren't about her work. You clean up well yourself. Shall we? Marcus offered his arm. They shared a car to Westfield Grand Hall, the Westfield skyline glittering against the early evening sky. The gala was in full swing by the time they arrived. Guests in tuxedos and gowns mingling beneath chandeliers, the soft strains of a string quartet floating through the air. James Wilson greeted them warmly, introducing Clara to several board members. Marcus blended easily, his natural charm smoothing every introduction. But Clara felt the shift in energy the moment Madeline Brooks appeared, elegant in a midnight blue gown, expression unreadable. Well, Madeline drawled, I see you found yourself some company, Ms. Johnson. Clara smiled coolly. Indeed, Marcus Reynolds, meet Madeline Brooks. Madeline's gaze flicked over him, calculating. Charmed. The pleasure's mine, Marcus said easily, his tone polite but firm. The power dynamic was palpable, an unspoken battle of wills unfolding in polite conversation. As the night progressed, Clara remained vigilant. She saw Madeline approach board members, saw the whispers, the careful smiles. But she also saw Elizabeth moving just as deliberately, engaging allies, steering conversations. Marcus leaned over as they watched from the edge of the ballroom. Think you've got enough backup? Clara smiled, feeling steadier than she expected. We'll find out soon enough. Whatever happened next, Clara knew one thing for sure. She wasn't backing down. Not from Karen, not from the politics, not from the challenge. Because this wasn't just about a contract anymore. It was about proving, once and for all, that change wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. Henry Crawford approached with a warm smile, his confident presence immediately commanding attention. Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Johnson, he said, extending his hand. Richard's been singing your praises since this morning. Clara shook his hand firmly, impressed by the easy authority Julian carried. Thank you, Mr. Washington. I appreciate the introduction. This is Marcus Reynolds from Telstra Financial. Ah, Julian nodded toward Marcus. Always good to see new faces at these events. Welcome. Julian turned his attention back to Clara. I understand you're the mastermind behind this new diversity initiative Richard is excited about? Clara smiled. I'm proposing a framework that connects recruitment, retention, and advancement. The goal is to make diversity a sustainable part of the company culture rather than just a series of initiatives. Julian chuckled. Now that's music to my ears. Been pushing for that shift for years, but old habits die hard in this industry. I'm learning that quickly, Clara admitted. But I found that data and the right champions can change minds. Julian grinned. Well, you found one champion right here. Richard clapped Julian on the back. That's what I like to hear. Clara, we'll make sure you meet the rest of the board tonight. Meanwhile, I see Karen's arrived. Excuse me. Clara stiffened at the mention of Madeline Brooks. The woman formerly known as Madeline Brooks in her head, now professionally polished in a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the grand rotunda's lights. Madeline's smile was flawless as she made the rounds, pausing every few steps to shake hands and exchange pleasantries. Marcus leaned in, his voice low. There's our favorite person. Clara sighed. Of course, she chairs the gala committee, because of course she does. Julian followed their gaze and smirked knowingly. Ah, Madeline Brooks. A force of nature and not always the good kind. Watch your back, Miss Johnson. That one plays the long game. Duly noted, Clara replied, her voice steady. As the evening unfolded, Clara navigated conversations with ease. She met board members, investors, and local dignitaries, all of whom seemed curious, if cautiously optimistic, about her proposed work with Pine Haven Financial. Through it all, Marcus remained a steady presence, effortlessly charming everyone he met. Between introductions, Marcus leaned in again. You're killing it, he murmured. The way you just handled that CFO, impressive. Clara gave a small, grateful smile. Thanks, but the real test is still coming. He followed her gaze toward Madeline, who was now deep in conversation with a group of senior executives. Think she'll try anything tonight? Wouldn't be surprised, Clara answered. But Elizabeth warned me, keep my composure. No matter what. Their conversation was interrupted as a server approached with flutes of champagne. Clara accepted one, the cold glass a brief comfort in her hand. Moments later, Madeline appeared. Ms. Johnson, she greeted, her tone perfectly pleasant. Marcus, enjoying the evening? We are, Clara replied coolly. It's a lovely event. Madeline's gaze flicked to Marcus, then back to Clara. Glad to hear it. Richard mentioned he's introducing you around. That's good. It's important everyone understands the scope of your proposal, Val. I'd hope so, Clara responded, refusing to rise to the bait. Transparency is key to successful implementation. Madeline's smile tightened. Indeed. Well, I won't keep you. Just wanted to say welcome. Officially. With that, she turned gracefully and disappeared back into the crowd. Well, Marcus exhaled, that felt loaded. It was, Clara agreed, and that was the warning shot. They continued mingling, Clara always aware of Madeline hovering nearby, observing, calculating, but she didn't falter. Instead, she leaned into her strategy, connecting with allies, reinforcing her presence, and quietly making it clear she belonged in this space. Later in the evening, Richard approached once more. Miss Johnson, there's someone else you should meet, Judge Edward Thompson. He's not on the board, but he's influential in our philanthropic initiatives. The judge was tall, with sharp blue eyes that missed little. Ms. Johnson, he greeted, shaking her hand firmly. I hear you're here to shake things up. Clara smiled, hopefully in the best way possible. Sir? The judge nodded approvingly. Good. This industry needs shaking. Let me know if anyone gives you trouble. Clara caught the subtle glance he threw toward Madeline, and her respect for the man deepened. As dinner was served, seared filet mignon with roasted vegetables and a rich red wine reduction, Clara allowed herself a moment to breathe. Marcus leaned over. Still think coming to this gala was a good idea? Absolutely, Clara said. You? Best conference detour I've ever made, he grinned. When dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate mousse with raspberry coulis, Richard stood for his closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generosity tonight. Your contributions will directly support educational programs on the south and west sides of our city. 78 students and counting have benefited because of your support. Applause echoed through the rotunda. And while tonight is about looking outward, it's also about looking inward, Richard continued. We are proud of what we've built at Pine Haven Financial, but we know there is work to do. Tonight you met Ms. Clara Johnson, who will help us lead that work. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the public endorsement. Richard smiled. We look forward to building a better future together. More applause. Clara caught Madeline's expression, tight-lipped, polite, but her eyes burned. Afterward, Julian found her. That was no small thing, Miss Johnson. Richard just put his reputation on the line for you. I noticed, Clara replied. It means the real fight starts tomorrow. Julian grinned. That's the spirit. As the evening wound down, Marcus offered his arm once more. Walk you out? I'd like that. They exited into the cool Westfield night, the city lights glittering around them. For the first time in days, Clara allowed herself to exhale fully. "You did good, Clara," Marcus said. "Whatever comes next, you've already won half the battle." Clara smiled, feeling the truth in his words. "Thanks, Marcus, but you know what?" "What?" "I think the real work is just beginning." And with that, they disappeared into the night, ready for whatever came next. Marcus Reynolds shook hands with Henry Crawford, the board member's grip firm and steady. "It's about time Pine Haven Financial brought in fresh perspective," Julian said with a knowing smile. "I've been pushing the board on this issue for years." "Julian's being modest," James Wilson chimed in. "He's been our conscience on diversity since he joined 5 years ago. Before that, he led the Westfield Urban League. Knows this space better than anyone." Clara Johnson smiled, immediately recognizing a potential ally. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Washington. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Davenport's current challenges and opportunities." "Absolutely," Julian grinned. "Find me later tonight. I've got plenty to share, including some things that never make it into official briefings." That conspiratorial gleam, one professional of color to another, was unmistakable. Clara felt a weight lift slightly. For once, she wasn't walking into this battle alone. As Julian and Richard were swept away by other guests, Marcus leaned in. "Well, that's promising. A board member already on your side." "Exactly," Clara murmured, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server, "and one with serious community credibility." They made their rounds, Clara introducing Marcus to Natalie Parker and a few department heads she'd connected with during her presentation. The conversations were light but strategic, planting seeds she knew would matter when implementation began. Conspicuously absent was Madeline Brooks, still the elegant figure in a crimson gown, her smile practiced, her eyes sharp. Clara caught glimpses of her directing staff, consulting on logistics. As chair of the gala, Madeline was fully in control and clearly avoiding Clara. "She's dodging you," Marcus observed as they found their table for dinner. "Probably for the best," Clara replied, but unease prickled her skin. In her experience, adversaries who retreated usually returned, sharper, more dangerous. Dinner progressed smoothly. Their table mates included Henry Crawford and his wife, Judge Vanessa Reynolds, a formidable presence in her own right, a young tech entrepreneur funding the educational program, and 2 VPs Clara knew she'd be working closely with. Conversation flowed easily. Westfield politics, fintech innovation, and the maddeningly slow progress of diversity in corporate America. The problem, Julian said as dessert arrived, a rich chocolate mousse, is companies treat diversity like a numbers game. Recruitment's easy. The real test is retention, advancement, culture. Exactly, Clara agreed. My framework integrates across the employee lifecycle. It's not just about who gets in the door. It's about whether they can see themselves climbing the ladder. That's what impressed me, Elizabeth added. You're not stopping at representation. You're driving toward measurable change. The praise buoyed Clara, but she stiffened as Madeline approached, her professional mask impeccable. I hope everyone's enjoying the evening, Madeline said, her gaze sweeping the table before landing, briefly but pointedly on Clara. The program begins in 15 minutes, followed by dancing and the auction results. Julian raised his glass. Excellent event, Madeline. The committee outdid themselves. Thank you, Julian, she replied warmly, too warmly. We're hoping to exceed last year's fundraising total. I'm sure you will, Elizabeth added smoothly, but Clara caught the subtle edge, especially with the new matching grant from the Davenport Foundation. A flicker, quick but real, crossed Madeline's face. Irritation, frustration, Clara couldn't tell, but she noticed. Yes, Madeline acknowledged tightly. Richard's daughter, Melissa, secured that funding. She's been deeply involved since leaving Goldman. Clara glanced at Elizabeth, instantly recalling the backstory, The daughter who fled a toxic boys' club. The barb was obvious, but at who? Elizabeth? The system? The diversity effort? Then Madeline turned finally to Clara. Ms. Johnson, she said, that flawless smile in place. Enjoying your first Davenport gala? It's impressive, Clara answered evenly. The educational program seems to be making a real impact. Yes, well, authentic community impact requires sustained commitment, not just fashionable initiatives designed to look good in annual reports. Clara blinked once. The implication was obvious, but she wasn't biting. I agree. That's why my framework focuses on sustainable transformation, strategic vision, long-term investment. Marcus shifted slightly, his presence steady beside her, a silent show of support. Madeline's eyes flicked to him. And you must be Ms. Johnson's colleague? The pause was deliberate. Clara felt it. Marcus Reynolds, he said pleasantly, Telstra Financial. Clara and I met through work. How fortunate you were free tonight. Madeline smiled thinly, her tone skimming the edge of propriety. Before Clara could respond, Julian cut in smoothly. Networking's the lifeblood of our industry, isn't it, Madeline? Some of my best professional relationships started just like this. Serendipity. Madeline's smile faltered, just a fraction. Indeed. Well, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on the program. As she swept away, Judge Washington exhaled. Some people can't help but show their hand. 20 years on the bench, Julian grinned. Gloria sees through everyone. It doesn't take a judge to see what that was, Gloria said dryly. She turned to Clara. Miss Johnson, be ready. That woman's going to push back. I'm ready, Clara assured her, and I've got allies who understand why this matters. She gave Elizabeth and Julian a grateful look. Count me in too, the tech entrepreneur added. My company's reaped real benefits from diversity. I'd be happy to speak to your team if it helps. Clara's chest lifted. Despite Madeline's veiled hostility, support was materializing around her. For every obstacle, there was a hand extended. When the program began, James Wilson took the stage. Tonight we celebrate what's possible when opportunity meets preparation. 78 students from this program have gone on to college, many the first in their families. Applause echoed through the rotunda. And now we turn that same lens inward, Richard continued. At Davenport, we know we have work to do. Tonight you've met Ms. Clara Johnson, who will help us do it. Clara's breath caught. Her framework offers a new way forward, a chance to ensure our values live inside these walls, not just in our marketing. More applause. And Madeline? Her hands clapped. Yes, but her eyes burned. After the program, Marcus leaned close. That was huge. Yeah, Clara whispered. The real fight's coming. But tonight, I think we just won round one. The program resumed with inspiring student speakers, young men and women from Westfield's South and West Sides who had benefited from Davenport's educational initiative. Their stories of perseverance, opportunity, and ambition captivated the room. By the time James Wilson returned to the stage to announce that the evening had raised over $1.2 million, with the silent auction still underway, the crowd erupted in applause. Then, as if on cue, Madeline Brooks took the stage. Polished and poised, her public persona in full display, she thanked the gala committee and the donors, her voice rich with passion about the power of education. It was, objectively, a flawless performance. Marcus leaned closer to Clara Johnson, murmuring, different person up there. Clara didn't miss a beat. The public version, everyone's got one. The crowd's applause rang out as Madeline stepped away from the mic. The jazz ensemble replaced the string quartet, soft melodies filling the rotunda as guests moved toward the dance floor or browsed the auction items. Henry Crawford and Judge Vanessa Reynolds excused themselves to mingle with other board members, while Natalie Parker was swept into conversations with major donors. Marcus turned to Clara, offering his hand. Would you care to dance? Despite my earlier warning about having 2 left feet. Clara surprised herself by smiling. I'd like that. The floor was comfortably crowded, perfect cover for a couple looking to blend in. Marcus needn't have downplayed his skills. He moved with natural rhythm, guiding Clara effortlessly as they found a quiet groove amidst the sway of elegant couples. After a moment, Marcus chuckled. Quite a night. You've got allies now, Julian, Elizabeth. Even James Wilson seems sold. Clara nodded but glanced across the room where Madeline stood deep in conversation with Edward Thompson, the general counsel, and one determined adversary. True, Marcus shrugged, but she looks outnumbered and less subtle than she thinks. Clara laughed, soft but genuine. That actually works in my favor. Obvious enemies are easier to navigate than the covert ones. They danced in comfortable silence, the jazz band playing a smooth rendition of The Way You Look Tonight. Despite the professional stakes, Clara found herself relaxing, actually enjoying the moment, enjoying Marcus. Thank you for being here tonight, she said, her voice low. It's been good, having someone in my corner. My pleasure, literally, Marcus smiled, his dark eyes warm. It's not every day I get to attend a black-tie gala with the most impressive woman in the room. Clara flushed. Hardly that. I beg to differ, but I won't embarrass you listing the evidence. As the song ended, James Wilson approached, his tux immaculate. Clara, I'd love to introduce you to a few more board members, if you don't mind. Clara glanced apologetically at Marcus. I'll check out the auction, he said easily. Take your time. Richard led her toward a group gathered near the windows, overlooking Millennium Park. 3 additional board members, older white men, powerful, influential, waited with polite interest. Julian's been quite persuasive, one of them, a retired banking executive, began. We know the financial sector's lagging behind in this area. My daughter tells me tech firms are way ahead on inclusivity, another added, the CEO of a major manufacturing company. We need to catch up. Claire engaged them thoughtfully, answering questions, outlining strategies. She recognized what this was, an opportunity to build real power behind her initiative. These men weren't just figureheads. Their influence reached deep within Davenport and across Westfield's business landscape. As she spoke, Clara caught a flash of red across the room, Madeline watching. Their eyes met. For a moment, Madeline didn't look away. Instead, she raised her champagne glass. Was it a toast or a challenge? Clara held her gaze for a beat, then refocused as Richard asked about implementation timelines. When she glanced back, Madeline had vanished, her committee chair smile back in place, floating through the crowd. The night continued in a blur of strategic conversations and another dance with Marcus before the event wound down around 11 p.m. As they stepped out into the crisp Westfield air, waiting for their car, Marcus glanced at Clara. Successful night? Very, Clara nodded. Several board members are genuinely committed. I see the landscape more clearly now, including the Karen factor. Including that, Marcus agreed, but you seem less worried. I am. She's got influence, but not as much as she thinks. Their car arrived, and as they settled into the back seat, Marcus glanced at her. Your hotel? There was weight to the question, a possibility lingering between them. Clara hesitated, torn between the draw she felt and the professionalism she'd fought hard to maintain. I think that's best, she said finally. It's been a long day. Early flight tomorrow. If Marcus was disappointed, he hit it well. Of course. I've enjoyed every minute, though. So have I, Clara smiled. And I'd like to see you again. Maybe when there's less corporate drama swirling around us. Marcus grinned. Next time you're in Westfield, or when I'm in Philly, no galas, no politics, just us. I'd like that. They rode through Westfield's gleaming downtown, conversation flowing easily, laughter punctuating the quiet moments. Clara found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought her here. What had begun as a tense confrontation over a seat on a plane had turned into a career-defining opportunity. And maybe, just maybe, something more. She'd built her life around control, around frameworks, strategies, carefully laid plans. But this was unscripted, unplanned, the kind of twist you couldn't see coming. When they arrived at the hotel, Marcus walked her to the lobby. There was a pause, both of them feeling the pull, the tension of the moment. "I'll call you after my flight lands tomorrow," Clara promised. "Thank you. For tonight." "It was my pleasure," Marcus smiled, then leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her cheek, perfectly balanced between friendly and something more. Clara felt the warmth of it linger long after he turned and walked away. Clara Johnson rode the elevator up to her hotel suite that night, a rare, genuine smile curving her lips. Whatever complications Madeline Brooks might create at Pine Haven Financial, whatever challenges the implementation of her framework might bring, tonight had reminded her of something important. Professional success was only one piece of a fulfilling life. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Invest in experiences, not just achievements. Maybe it was time she took that advice seriously. 1 month later, Clara stood at the window of her temporary office on the 47th floor of Pine Haven Financial, watching Westfield's iconic skyline fade into the golden hues of twilight. It was her third week into implementation, and while there had been obstacles, some predictable, some less so, the initiative was moving forward more smoothly than she dared hope. A large part of that success was thanks to the allies she'd cultivated, starting that night at the gala. Natalie Parker had proven invaluable, using her influence as chief operating officer to remove bureaucratic roadblocks and hold department heads accountable. Henry Crawford, ever the strategic thinker, checked in weekly, offering insight on the company's shifting power dynamics. Even James Wilson himself had surprised her, attending the launch session in person and publicly tying Clara's diversity framework to Pine Haven's 5-year strategic plan in front of senior leadership. As for Madeline, she had maintained a professional veneer. She attended meetings, provided the requested data, sometimes later than needed, and even made obligatory supportive statements in front of the board. Yet Clara sensed the undercurrent, the subtle resistance, carefully worded questions designed to stir doubt. Phrases like, "We wouldn't want to create unrealistic expectations," classic passive-aggressive undermining, Elizabeth had warned her. Still, Clara had learned long ago that you don't defeat opponents like Madeline with brute force. You outlast them. You build undeniable value until resistance becomes impossible to justify. A soft knock pulled Clara from her thoughts. Elizabeth stood in the doorway. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Wanted to check in before I head out." "Of course," Clara gestured toward the conference table. "I was just wrapping up." Elizabeth settled in, her expression thoughtful. "Word around the building is good. People are actually engaged in the sessions, more than I can say for most of our corporate initiatives." "That's encouraging," Clara replied. "I've found that once people see how diversity drives innovation and problem solving, they stop viewing it as just another compliance box." Elizabeth nodded. "Agreed. Though I ran into an interesting hallway conversation earlier. Karen's assistant cornered me. Wanted to know if I had seen the preliminary listening session metrics." Clara's brow lifted. "Oh, any particular metric she seemed fixated on?" "Employee satisfaction, specifically among women in middle management. Apparently, Madeline's been floating this narrative that your approach could create unrealistic expectations, leading to disappointment and disengagement." Clara snorted softly. "It's the classic move. Manufacture potential harm as justification to stall progress." "Exactly. I shut it down, of course, but figured you should know." "Thank you," Clara mused for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Actually, this could work in our favor. Early data shows those women are thrilled to have structured pathways for advancement. They're tired of being excluded from the informal networks." Elizabeth's eyes gleamed. "So Madeline's chosen angle might just spotlight one of your early wins?" "Exactly, if we position it right." Elizabeth leaned back. "What's your move?" Clara hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about inviting her to co-lead the mentorship program design. It's visible, ties to her expertise, and forces her to be part of the solution. Elizabeth laughed. Clever, give her ownership. And if she refuses, she exposes herself. Refusing puts her opposition front and center. Bad optics given the board's support. Elegant trap, Elizabeth grinned. Remind me again why we didn't just hire you full-time? They shared a laugh before Elizabeth glanced at her watch. I should go. My husband's cooking tonight, which happens about once a fiscal quarter. Clara grinned. Then go enjoy it while it lasts. At the door, Elizabeth paused. By the way, how's your Westfield connection? Marcus, wasn't it? The question caught Clara off guard. She and Marcus had stayed in touch. Calls, texts, plans. He was visiting Philadelphia next month. It was still new, but it felt real. It's promising, Clara admitted, unable to hide her smile. We're taking it slow, but yeah, there's something there. Elizabeth smiled, warm and genuine. Good for you. This work can consume us if we let it. Balance matters. Once alone, Clara turned back to the window, watching the city light up against the dark sky. Her phone buzzed. Tisham. A text from Marcus. Just landed in Westfield. Conference tomorrow. Any chance you're free for dinner? Pleasure sparked through her. She hadn't known he'd be in town. She replied, definitely, 7:30 at Maple and Ash. I'll make the reservation. His answer came quick. Perfect. Can't wait to see you. Clara tucked her phone away, a smile lingering as she packed up her laptop. Life was strange. That airplane confrontation felt like a lifetime ago. Yet here she was, a pivotal project underway, and something unexpectedly personal blossoming. She shut off the office light, stepping into the glow of Westfield's skyline. Some of the hardest moments, she realized, lead to the most surprising places. Sometimes, justice and opportunity walk through the same door you're afraid to open. And tonight, she was ready for whatever came next. Life has a funny way of testing us in moments we least expect. What started as a simple dispute over a plane seat for Clara Johnson became a powerful reminder of how standing your ground, even in the face of subtle prejudice and manipulation, can open doors to opportunities far greater than you ever imagined. Clara's story isn't just about corporate success. It's about the quiet strength it takes to navigate spaces where the odds, and sometimes the people, seem stacked against you. Too often people, especially women and minorities, are taught to stay silent, to move seats, to avoid making a scene for the sake of peace. But peace built on injustice is never real peace. Clara chose to hold her ground, not out of pride, but out of principle. She knew that giving up her seat wasn't just about a window view. It was about refusing to be diminished in a space she rightfully belonged. That choice led to connections she couldn't have predicted, a professional opportunity at Pinehaven Financial, and an unexpected personal bond with Marcus. The real lesson here is that life rewards those who stay true to themselves, even when it's uncomfortable. Challenges, like Madeline Brooks's quiet resistance or society's unspoken biases, are inevitable. There will always be someone who believes they can push you aside, question your qualifications, or subtly sabotage your progress. But instead of reacting with anger or fear, Clara approached every obstacle with grace, strategy, and an unwavering belief in the value of her work. She found allies in unexpected places, people who saw her not just for the color of her skin or her gender, but for the skills, wisdom, and leadership she brought to the table. And isn't that what we all want? To be seen, respected, and valued for who we are and what we contribute? Clara's journey reminds us that sometimes the moments that feel like setbacks, like being targeted on a plane or challenged in a boardroom, are actually setting us up for a breakthrough. It's not about avoiding conflict, but learning how to navigate it with dignity and strategy. At the end of the day, true success isn't just climbing the corporate ladder or winning contracts. It's knowing you stayed true to your values, earned respect the right way, and created opportunities not just for yourself, but for others who will come after you. And sometimes along the way, you might even find something unexpected, like love, friendship, or a reminder that you're exactly where you're meant to be. So the next time life tries to push you out of your seat, remember Clara's story. Stay calm, stand your ground, and trust that what's meant for you will always find its way. If you enjoyed Clara's story and the powerful lesson behind it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us out. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder to stand their ground and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and what you think about Clara's journey. And if you enjoy stories like this, real, dramatic, and packed with life lessons, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep bringing you more inspiring stories just like this one. Thank you for watching.